Hi, I'm Aaron of the KMA, and the 1,000 second album is Twice Removed by the mighty Sloan.
Hi, I'm Jeff Stephen, and you're listening to the 1,000 Second Album podcast. I spent 10 years going through the 1,001 albums you must hear before you die, and now I'm asking people that are important to me all about the albums that are important to them. Enjoy! This is the 1,000 Second Album podcast. I'm Jeff Stephen, and I'm particularly excited for today's show because my guest today is a gentleman whose generosity knows no bounds. He is my 8-track supplier for most of my collection, and is also the person who coined the all caps phrase "community." And please welcome from Keeps Me Alive, Aaron Stewart.
It's a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. And the album of choice today is Sloan's Twice Removed. And I guess to start, what is the Aaron and Sloan origin story?
Okay, they are one and the same. I actually saw Sloan in concert before I owned any albums. And the first album I bought was this one, Twice Removed. So for me, this album is all about history and context. So I was starting second year university, and one of my friends, Leslie, she said, "You're coming with me to this concert." And I said, "Who is it?" And she told me, and I had no idea. And we went, and my mind was blown. I actually still have the ticket stub. It was the Capitol Theater in Windsor, 1994, September 28th at 7:30 p.m. I was in Theater A in seat L21 if time travelers want to come back and get me. I looked up on Setlist FM, and they did not have a set list for that gig. But there were some around it, and they played all the songs that you think you'd want to know or want to hear at that time with only the two albums. I do remember Underwhelmed being played, which isn't on this album. And I only remember that because I've teased my KMA brother James quite a bit because he saw Sloan often, and they never played that song when he saw them.
Okay.
And I'd say, well, they played it the first time I saw them, That's a sort of a long-standing joke with him. But I also remember Jay pulling a pretty girl up on stage during one of the songs, giving her his guitar, and then running off to dance and have fun. And she's standing there holding the thing going, I don't know what. But overall, I remember a great energy. And I didn't know any of the songs. I didn't know anything about the band, who they were, what they were about, where they were from. I didn't know anything. And I came away thinking, wow, that was really, really something. That they were already a well-oiled machine. And the songs were memorable and catchy and fun. And I went and bought Twice Removed at Dr. Disc in Windsor very quickly after that. And then not too long after got Peppermint and Smeared as well. So, and I've been a first day buyer ever since.
As you should be.
Yes. Yeah. Now, the only other thing is that I can find here, and I still have the newspaper clipping from the campus newspaper from the Lance. I don't even know if they still do that in Windsor or not, but they said the openers were Thrush Hermit and Super Friends.
My goodness.
Yeah. Now, I, in my memory, thought it was Local Rabbits, but I have seen Sloan 5 times. So it is entirely possible that it was Thrush Hermit. I know I've seen all those bands, but I don't remember it being that night. So, I will trust the journalist on that one.
At the Lance. I like that.
Yeah, at the Lance in 1994.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah, and what a treat for that to be the introduction to the group too, where it's just those first couple albums and those songs dominate the set list too. Not that there's any wrong answers of the rest of the albums, but just to have the spotlight right on those, that's amazing.
I didn't even have the album. I just went along because she said I had.
Well, Leslie was wise, so that's good.
She probably still is wherever she is. Yeah,
she definitely steered you in the right direction, which is good. And I guess you can thank her for some of your investments over the next few decades as well, because I guess they're now up to album number 13 in the catalog now. So
I haven't counted, but I have them all.
Yeah, I think the penultimate one was the 12th. So if my math is correct, they're up to the baker's dozen now as well. And what would you say it is about this one that stands out as the maybe the must hear from their catalog?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I feel like this is a controversial pick. I think a lot of people would say the next album from 96, One Chord to Another, would be the one where we should talk about that. But for me, this is sort of my Batman origin story, right? Like, not that anybody was killed in an alley, but
No.
what I'm saying is, this is formative for me. This is where I started with the band, was hearing these songs, and I didn't know anything about them. So no aspersions on everything they've done since, but to me, Twice Removed is the album that I think everybody should hear first because I
Nice.
did.
Nice. I mean, and I was one of those folks that heard One Chord to Another first. I have a vivid memory of walking around with my Discman, listening to the songs and just being blown away. But I think I like that idea of that. If it was part of your formation, then it makes sense to start there too. It's amazing. It's been those same four guys for the last 30 plus years too.
Oh
And
yeah.
so the Andrew, Chris, Jay, and Patrick. And my question for you would be, apart from handing guitars to people on stage like Jay did, what do the different guys bring to the group dynamic?
So Chris is your ringleader. Chris is your front man. He's the life of the party when everybody else is maybe not feeling it. Chris is in it. He's always there. I think of Jay as the curator. He has a real palpable love of music, and it's very infectious. And he brings that to everything he does. I think Patrick is the great leveler of the whole thing, sort of the steady hand. He may not look like he's having fun sometimes. If you ever see him on stage, sometimes he's not smiling, but I think he actually is having fun. I think he's just concentrating. And I think Andrew is the elusive one. He's a monster on the drum kit, and then poof, he's gone. Like, he's never around to talk to after shows. He's never, like, he's just gone. So I think in that way, he might be my Charlie Watts Canadian version, because Charlie was the same way. If there wasn't anything Stones going on, he didn't think about it at all. Because and you put those four things together and you get Sloan, and there couldn't be any other way. I've had the good fortune of meeting Chris twice, once in Saskatoon and once here in Meaford, and Patrick once. Both were supremely gentlemanly. They were great dudes, awesome. I may once have stood next to Jay at BMV in Toronto on Bloor Street, but I wasn't sure it was him. So I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be that guy. But also, if it was him, I didn't want to be that guy,
Yes,
right? Like,
understandably, yeah.
right? I'm such a Canadian, right? I didn't want to bother him.
Yeah.
But, he's digging through records and he doesn't want to put on his, oh, now I got to meet the fans hat
Yeah.
and, that kind of thing. I just let it go. And Andrew, I was in Cops on Queen Street once. No, that was up on Bloor too. And the guy who was working there told me he had been in that day, but he was already gone. So again, elusive,
Yeah. It's like the pokeroo, you missed him again. So
That's right. Yeah. I think he likes it that way.
yeah, that's fun. No, and I like that description of them all, because and I remember seeing Chris on the Rick Mercer report one year, right? I totally can't picture the other guys sort of bopping around town on adventures with Rick Mercer at all. And I guess if Jay is in fact the curator with a love of music, and you're potentially running into him at the record store, I think that holds up, which is good. Nice. And I think
Yeah.
you're totally right. It has to be those four guys, and probably part of what makes Twice Removed so special is that they're all contributing as well. And if you're up for it, could we take a look at their tracks as contributed by group member?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Which member would you care to start with?
Oh, well, Chris, because he's out front.
Perfect. I like it. Nice. And I guess
Yeah.
it makes sense because he starts off the album with Pen Pals.
Yeah, that's a great song. I learned from the internets
Mhm.
when they signed with Geffen Records, the lyrics for that song actually came from a fan letter that had been written in broken English by a fan, but it was intended for Nirvana. And so and that's an interesting tie-in too, because after Smeared,
Yes.
Geffen signed Sloan because they thought they were going to be another Nirvana clone. And everybody was looking for those so they could make money off of this new sound coming out of Seattle and everything else. And then Sloan went and made this record, which flew in the face and the expectations of everybody and was awesome in its own right, but not what they were looking for. So
Right.
cool that that was the first song.
For sure. I like that. The yeah, to me you seem giant. And the
Yes. Yeah, right.
yeah.
You know,
That's funny. I hadn't realized they weren't the intended recipient of that letter too. That's fantastic. So, nice. The and I guess it might have been broken English in that track, but Chris's next tune, Coax Me, actually, I have him to thank for a couple that
oh.
was where I learned a couple of new words in terms of coaxing and cajoling. I have Chris Murphy to thank for introducing those to my vocabulary.
And it's a great tune,
Oh, what a tune. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and a concert staple. I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this when we go through this, and I said if they threw a concert right now, they could play 6 of the songs on this album and everyone would know them. That to me speaks to the depth and the strength that you've got here.
Yeah.
Even people who don't know Sloan would say, yeah, I've heard that on the radio or,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing. They would know the tune. And Coax Me is one of those for sure. So,
Absolutely. The and I remember that was where one year we learned the left one of our like the left or right audios was broken because you could only hear one of the guitars. And that
oh,
was my lesson, that they panned the one sort of lead part into one ear and the chords in the other. It's like something's missing here.
yeah.
But on two working headphones, it's beautiful to hear the
Oh,
panning
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. And then I guess Chris's next one in line was Bells On, and
Mhm.
yeah, a little more subdued, but no less quality there either.
Yeah, absolutely. Not one you would credit him with. You wouldn't, of the 4 guys,
Yeah.
I don't think you would think of him first for that song.
No. Yeah.
But I love it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And the I love that in accounting we talk about accounts receivable and accounts payable, and I think of him whenever I think of someone having a debt of $30 with that line, like, would he pay back the $30 that he says I
You
owe him?
always wonder if he ever did get it, right?
Yeah.
All
I do
these
need,
years
yeah.
later.
I do need closure to hear if the debt was finally repaid, or if it was just written off somehow. But that's
That's
good.
the ultimate fan question when you meet him.
Yes, some days. So next time, yeah, I'll
Yep.
be sure to remember. I like it. And
Mhm.
then Shame Shame, of course.
There's a melodicism to those last 2
Mhm.
that I don't, because see, Chris is known for writing the big sort of anthems sometimes and the big
Yeah,
happy fun songs, like because he's a
yeah,
big puppy, right? You know,
sure.
so he writes the songs like this, but there's a melodicism that runs through it all, and I think credit it where it is due because those songs are awesome.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And you mentioned the that if they were to play this, almost 3 decades later, about half of the tunes would still
Mhm.
be requested live. And I think his last credit on the album is the one that probably most of us would be, chomping at the bit to hear, "Deeper Than Beauty."
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And one of those great like less is more, where I think it's only guitar and drums there too, but it works so well with just the duo.
Yeah, and you know, this band, they've got it, man, and they had it early,
Yeah.
and they've never lost it. See, we're
Just
talking about this, and I hope it's inspiring people to go find the album and go,
yes.
this song, Deeper Than Beauty, you know, I've never heard that. I want to hear that. Get on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. Get out there and hear it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
or better yet, yeah, see it live too. I remember one show,
Yes.
Patrick went behind the drum kit. I guess came on as an encore, and so Chris was there with the guitar in front, but then Patrick took a seat behind the drum kit to play the drums for it, and it was a blast.
Yeah,
And
and that's another thing that's really cool about all the songwriting here. You're mentioning the songs
yeah,
and who wrote what, is that they all have input, they all have a song on there and
yes,
songwriting credits, but they also play the instruments. They switch
yes.
instruments throughout the show. If anybody's never seen them, it's wild to watch. They'll pick a song and it's like, oh, it's Andrew's turn to sing, and then Chris will go play the drums, and you know, they'll
Yeah.
swap things around. It's really kind of fun.
Yeah, no, very versatile, which is neat. And
Yeah.
and I guess the guy that introduced me to Sloan was Patrick, and he has 3 tunes on here. What do you make of
Yep.
Loosens, Worried Now, and I Can Feel It?
Brilliant, more brilliant, and even more brilliant. You know, especially Worried Now. There's something about the way that is put together, just the way the words are in there, and it's catchy as hell.
Yeah.
But when you're listening to it, it's superbly crafted. All three of them. I
Mhm.
mean, all of them, of course. But "Worried Now" is another one of those songs that I would say they could show up and play, and everybody go yay and dance around, and it'd be fine.
Yeah.
It
I
would be
wouldn't
good.
object.
No, 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 not at all. Yep,
Nice. And that
yep,
sequencing too is great where Loosens is just the tempo's so gentle and then all of a sudden the drums kick in for Worried Now and away we go.
yep. They
Uh,
all this album is captivating. I
yeah.
keep talking. I feel like I'm talking to the people who haven't heard it. I
Yeah.
also feel like most people have,
Yeah.
um, but if you haven't, or if you haven't heard it in a while, plug it in.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right about the sequencing. It's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then the other two dudes, of course, they've got their roles as well. And Andrew, he chipped in a couple People of the Sky and Before I Do.
Yes. People of the Sky. Man, I love that song.
Yeah.
And my bias will start to show. You're mentioning all these tunes and I get
Yeah.
excited, but
Yeah.
there are standouts. And that was actually another one that I thought that if they showed up and played it, you
Yeah.
know, like if they were doing a greatest hits show, they could play more than half of this album.
Mhm.
They'd be there for 5 hours because
Yeah.
they've got so many good songs.
Exactly. And that would be such a great crowd participation one too with that ba 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 da ba.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. See, it's supremely catchy.
Yeah.
Earworms, every one.
And I guess Before I Do has that great like much with the question to ask them one time with bells on. Same with Before I Do. I don't have the foggiest idea what he's saying in the outro there, but always
I mean,
captivated listening every time.
I defer to who knows. I
Yeah.
don't know. But Before I Do is another great song,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's the penultimate song on the album,
Yeah.
and it's perfectly placed, and it
Yeah.
sounds like it should.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like they sprang into being fully formed.
Mhm.
Somehow in my head, Sloan songs just exist.
Yep.
Like that they didn't woodshed, they didn't spend all that time songwriting. They just work.
Yeah.
Like
They
they
just
just show.
exist.
Yeah, it's like they thaw them out, make a Sloan record, and freeze them again.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. But yeah, the and it's yeah, just what a great like just that big. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of 7 minutes too, and then just yeah, just beautifully placed as you said. And then finally, Jay Ferguson it has a couple tracks there as well. I Hate My Generation and Snowsuit Sound.
I would say that Snowsuit Sound, if anyone was looking to put on a Sloan song that would it just resonates. There's something about and I would put them in the same ballpark with the Tragically Hip on this. There's something that resonates in your own experience, in your own past. When you're a kid and winter and you're outside in your snowsuit. Yes, but then the song has a whole other thing to it as well, right? So it's working on many levels in your brain, and multiple listens are still rewarding.
Mhm. For
Yeah.
sure, and they definitely found a way to hook me right away. Those hand claps at the beginning are just
Yes.
perfection as well. So, yeah, just genius,
And it's fun in
genius.
concert.
It is, yes, absolutely, yeah. So, they know their
Audience
audience.
participation.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, no, 12 tunes that are just yeah, 30 years later still sound fresh, and yeah, I'm hoping we'll be treated to some special editions in the next year or so as well, because there's yeah, just so good, so good. The and I guess sort of the catch-all question would be why would this be the 1002nd album that one must hear?
Okay, you remember off the top, I said that this album for me is about history and context. And I gave you the history. Here's the context. Okay, you have to remember 1994. Okay, and you have to think about what else was out there at the time. So I have a short list if you'll indulge me.
Please
Think
do.
about this. This was the stew we were in at the time. You had the Weezer Blue album, Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral, Jeff Buckley's Grace, Nas Illmatic, Green Day's Dookie, Pavement's Crooked Rain, Soundgarden Super Unknown, The Tragically Hip's Day for Night, Pearl Jam Vitalogy, REM Monster, You had Guided by Voices Beat Thousand. You had Nirvana's Unplugged, Offspring Smash, Cranberries No Need to Argue, Stone Temple Pilots Purple, Beck's Mellow Gold, Beastie Boys Ill Communication. When you think about what was going on in music at that time, this album sits in that, but it also sits outside, I think. I think it's special because it didn't. A lot of those albums are American and they sold bazillions of copies to everyone who has electricity. But they weren't quite Sloan yet, right? Like they had the one album in the EP and they put out this record. And I really think the next one is what exploded them. This one led to it, but I really think One Chord to Another was where everybody said, "Oh, hey, I like those guys." You know, this one sort of sits in there. But I also think it's important to look at the context for me personally, because I had left high school, started university in '93. And before that, I was listening to my childhood 80s pop and a lot of jazz and blues.
Mhm.
So getting out of the house and into a new city and surrounded by excited young people and hearing all kinds of new music, my musical palette was really expanding. And so when someone like Leslie came to me and said, "Hey, you're coming to this concert," and I said, "Who is it?" And she said, "Doesn't matter, you're coming with me." And then I loved it. That was that when you're in your early 20s, or at least 18, 19 years old, when that stuff is happening, that becomes bedrock. That becomes formative for you. And so for me, the context is I went from there. Of course, if you look at the KMA, I'm into metal and classical and all kinds. I'm all over the place. But Sloan was always, they weren't necessarily huge in terms of sales,
Mhm.
but they still hold sort of an unrivaled place in Canadian rock where they've carved out their own little thing
Mhm.
and it's awesome. And everybody who knows them loves them, and everybody who doesn't know them should. But
Yes.
they're not necessarily the great big band that blew up because they got so big they couldn't handle it, right? Like it's. I remember seeing them here in Meaford, and I turned to my buddy Craig. He came with me. I was given tickets for my birthday, and I said to him, "Man, we should do this." Right? It's just four guys on a
Yeah.
stage writing awesome songs and having fun with it. They were inviting the crowd to go swimming with them after the gig down in Fortune Bay. They were like, "Let's go." I said, "We could do this." And he's like, "No, man." He said, his opinion was you have to do that just for the love of the music. Because for him, it wasn't enough of a money maker.
Mhm.
And to me, I was like, I don't care about that. It looks like fun. Let's
Mhm.
go. Like let's get up there, and if it's 15 people, you're still going to have a blast. But his opinion was very interesting to me. The other thing I would mention in terms of context for the band is some of the accolades for this album. I did a little bit of research. In 1996, Chart Magazine did their top 100 greatest Canadian albums of all time, and this album was number one, ahead of Neil Young's Harvest and Joni Mitchell Blue and everything else. It was number one. When they did a follow up, it fell to number three
Mhm.
in 2000. And then in 2005, they did it again and it was back at number one.
Stayed on the podium the whole time.
Right? There's something about this album that it was also number 14 in Bob Merzrow's book, The Top 100 Canadian Albums.
Mhm.
It was certified gold in 1998. So, I mean, it's not like it's an underdog album. I mean, people know about it and people have appreciated it for years, but it's still not on that next level where they became,
Mhm.
and I think maybe the next album pushed them in that direction,
Mhm.
more so than this one. I think the polling and the numbers are insignificant because it's awesome and you should all just hear it.
Yeah.
But it's a feeling, right? It's not
Yeah.
necessarily that should sell it to you. It's a feeling in your gut when you listen to that album. You go, "Wow, that was really masterful. Well
Yeah.
done."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's I love that it wasn't what the label thought they were getting. How they wanted more of the
Yes.
the Nirvana, but it's like this isn't the package we were after. But it ended up being this, as you said, masterfully created document, anyways. So, yeah.
Yeah, and good on Geffen Records too, I would say, because if they hired Sloan or signed Sloan to be a Canadian Nirvana after Smeared,
Mhm.
right? And then they turned in the album and they didn't get that,
Yeah.
not in quite the way they were expecting. They could have canned that and said, thanks, guys, we're out of here. And we're not going to release this. So somebody at Geffen still recognized that there was beauty,
Yeah.
it was deeper than beauty.
Nice.
Somebody at Geffen recognized that there was still power
Yeah.
and a great album there, like it's
Yeah. They said, I can feel it. I can feel
yes,
it.
right. I can feel it. Why can't you? Yes, better than letting them go and just remaining pen pals as well.
Yeah. So to speak, exactly.
So to speak.
And then they just were able to keep doing their thing from there. Because they start Murder Records for the next album potentially?
Murder Records started in 1992, so before this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that's another thing that goes to the power of Sloan.
Yeah.
I think Murder Records is an important piece of the puzzle as well,
Mhm.
because it gave them those four guys. It gave them an outside focus. I think sometimes bands implode when they're trying to be famous or when they're trying to write the song that'll get played on the radio or whatever, and they get mad at each other. Or they get in a van and try to drive across Manitoba and it breaks up, right? Or whatever it is, because it sucks. All deference to anyone in Manitoba. But the Murder Records gave them that outside focus, some way not only to protect and release their own stuff, but also to promote and release stuff from other bands that they liked. And I really think a venture like that can be a glue that holds guys together, right? Because
Mhm.
in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing this. But there's also a strength in that autonomy in saying, okay, well, we're not reliant on a record label. We have our own, right? Like, we can do this on our own. It means giving up a lot, but we don't need that. We're not giving up our creative integrity
Mhm.
or artistic licenses to somebody behind a desk who didn't like what they heard.
Yeah.
That, so there's something to that. There's a strength there too.
Yeah.
And I think Murder Records is an important piece.
For sure. And I loved how, like, when you got those CDs in the 90s, they would have the little insert as well with those, like you said, the other bands that they liked and
Yes.
wanted to promote. So, which is how I learned about Thrush Hermit and Eric Strip and
Mm.
all the other ones.
Yeah,
So,
Elevator and all those.
yeah,
And it's kind of like old science fiction novels that used
yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
There used to be a list in the back of other novels you might like if you like this one. Because I think an important thing to remember too, for people listening who maybe were born and have always had the internet in their life,
Mhm.
born later,
Yeah,
us old fogies remember when there were three channels on the TV and you didn't hear anything about anything because, like myself growing up in a town of 300 people, there was nothing. The Saturday Star was all we ever had.
yeah.
And so you don't get that conversation that you do now. Finding new things was really difficult
Mhm.
and a lot of work. You had to put in the time, you had to put
Sure.
in the effort. And so for somebody to do that and say, hey, here's some other stuff you might like, that's gold.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you will go check that out because it's just saved me asking everybody I know what else I should be looking for.
I like this. I guess maybe this project then is going a bit in reverse, where I'm spending a lot of time asking people I know what I should listen to next. So you guys are providing the role
Yeah,
of Sloan for me of recommending the the next things, which is very much appreciated.
yeah. Well, it's a public service.
Exactly, it's the least we can do, I guess. But a huge thank you for coming today, Aaron, and until the next
Oh,
time.
thanks for having me. Yes, if there is a next time, I'll look forward to that. That'll be great. Thanks for having
Oh,
me, Jeff.
for sure. Enjoy. This has been the 1000-Second Album Podcast. Thanks for sharing some of your time, energy, and attention with us today. Take care.